Well, good afternoon, everybody who's joining in. I'm Christine Paszewski with the Olean Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to our first virtual Lunch and Learn. This is the first Lunch and Learn that we're doing virtually. It's going to be recorded, and then it's going to be sent out to our members through our newsletter. And what I'd like to do is welcome Patrick Rost, owner of InfoSecurity Blueprint. He's going to be the presenter today. And before I do, I just want to thank our sponsors, Milestone Financial and Envision Benefits Group. And with that, Patrick, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Christine. I just want to start by thanking the Olean Chamber for organizing the Lunch and Learn event, inviting me to participate in this. I want to thank everybody for joining to watch, registering to watch on demand, however you're watching. I appreciate your time. So today I'm going to talk about how to build an information security program for your business, how to get started, what you should consider. Before I do that, though, let's go. So I'm Patrick Rost, owner advisor InfoSecurity Blueprint. A little bit of summary of the background there is a bachelor degree in information technology, 13 years of experience in tech. The last 4 I spent before starting InfoSecurity Blueprint as a security consultant at a Buffalo-based accounting firm. And I've been running InfoSecurity Blueprint since December. Outside of work, I'm an active volunteer firefighter, sit Amherst Chamber Emerging Business Leaders Board, junior achievement classroom instructor, and a member of the Canisius Analytics and Data Ecosystem Advisory Board. And I was a speaker at B-Sides Buffalo for my presentation on Patching Your Future, a Guide to Career in Cybersecurity. So just note before we move on, all links in this presentation everything is underlined in this presentation are hyperlinks. So it's not going to be very helpful now. Obviously, you can't click on the links I'm presenting, but if you use that QR code or jot down my email address and the contact info there and reach out to me, I'm more than happy to share this presentation with you. It's kind of designed to be a resource for you to have. It's not just for me to share with you. There's a lot of content in it. So please, if there's one thing or a handful of things in here you want to click on, shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. A little about InfoSecurity Blueprint. The reason I started this business is I wanted to provide solutions to small and medium businesses that fit the size of their business. So that's why you see in the mission, there's an emphasis on startups, micro business, nonprofits, really businesses who are probably less likely to have the resource available and probably more likely to need that type of resource. So with that in mind, I set my values of education. That's everything from presentations like this to some of the things you saw in my bio that I'm involved with giving back to schools and other presentations I've done. Part of that is continuing education myself. I need to be a leader in the industry, so I need to stay educated myself. So that's really important to me. And then when I work with clients, making sure that they're educated what's going on is not just me, snapping my fingers and things are good. It's the client becoming engaged, the collaboration, my next value, and just understanding what's going on and learning as we go. Passion, I'm going to talk about in a second. That's real important to me. I think that's key in anybody who's starting their own business. And then respect and integrity, I think, just go hand in hand with being a good business person. So the reason for the passion, cyber incidents have surged among small businesses that often do not have the resources to defend against devastating attacks like ransomware. So that's similar to what I said, earlier on in my mission and my values. And I want to make sure I can do everything I can to help small businesses have resources that maybe larger enterprises have that the small businesses don't. And part of that are the stats that are below that. So 71% of cyber attacks occur at businesses with fewer than 100 employees. So I think a lot of times we see the big news stories about these big companies, these billion-dollar companies getting attacked because they have the money and they have, what criminals want to go after. And it's the sentiment is, oh, well, we're just a local business with 10 employees. No one knows about us. Why would they come after us? But I think that 71% number kind of changes the narrative on that a little bit. attackers know that those businesses are vulnerable and go after them because of it. In addition, 39% of companies with fewer than 250 employees, they're not confident in their cybersecurity readiness. So two different employee counts to kind of categorize what a small business is. But if 40% almost of businesses aren't ready and 71% of attacks occur at those businesses, that's just going to be catastrophic. And then on average, small, medium businesses spend between roughly $800,000 and $650,000 on cybersecurity incidents. Huge range that depends on what the incident is. But the key thing on there is that cybersecurity incidents. It doesn't say breaches. It doesn't mean that your data, the data you're holding has been stolen. It just means you've had some sort of incident. And then before we really dig in, just one more clarification here of information versus cybersecurity. So you'll hear me saying information security a lot, and you might be saying, oh, is that cybersecurity? Is that the same thing? It's used interchangeably, and it's not wrong necessarily to do it. But the differentiation I make is that cybersecurity, when you hear that, you think technical controls that are in place, and you think ransomware, and you think hacking, and you think that kind of thing. And information security really branches outside of just technology into administrative controls in your business, physical controls, and governance, and your risk management. And it's a lot more comprehensive than just cybersecurity. So an easy way to think of it is, are you trying to protect your information or your cyber, whatever that means? So one of the things I said there was governance. So let's talk about what that means. So this long block of text is how the NIST Cybersecurity Framework version 2 defines governance, but really comes down to this: the roles, responsibilities, authorities, policy, oversight, how the organization implements the other functions, how it supports risk communication. So, most simply put, governance is how. How are you doing the things you need to be doing? Not just what are you doing, not do you just have stuff in place, it's how are you doing it, and a little bit of why are you doing it. So this is about building an information security program. So let's just answer, why are we doing that? Other than, maybe you just want to be secure, which would be great. But there's also these regulations. And this is just 4 examples of common regulations that require it. So you can see the bold and the italicized text: policy procedures, information security policy, security program, information security program. In one way or another, if you fall in a regulated industry, you are being required to have a program in place. So I referenced the NIST Cybersecurity Framework version 2 earlier. I'm going to dig in and explain what that is, because this is, for me, the base of how you're going to build the program. It's using this framework. So version 2 was just released in February 2024. So it had a nice update at the current framework. The big thing that they did in the update this year was added govern as a function. So previously it was the 5 functions are on the outside there, and they added govern to the middle. So I broke down a little bit of what govern was already, and the reason it's in the middle is because it helps facilitate those other 5. So the way that the framework operates in general is you start at the top like a clock, and you start working your way through identify, and that's where you identify your systems, you identify your risk, and you become aware of everything that's in your environment. You work through the subcategories that they have in identify, and then you go to protect. And that's typically where most businesses are doing the best. They have a lot of controls in place. They have antivirus and firewalls and all of the tools in place to try to protect themselves. So they'll score high there. But then it falls off after that. So detect. How do you know that you're having an incident? That maybe that incident's a breach. How are you reacting to it? So you move into respond. What are we doing about it now that we're aware of it? And then lastly, how do you recover? So that incident that you had some sort of negative effect on your business. How do you get back to operating like you should? So there's a description of kind of what I just said about the functions. And here's a breakdown of the functions. So there's the 6 functions. They break down into 22 categories, and they break down even further into 106 subcategories. And the reason that I recommend the NIST Cybersecurity Framework is it's flexible. You don't have to do all 106 of them. It's not like a regulation saying, oh, here's the list of things you have to do, go do all of them. It's saying, here's 106 things that are best practice. Choose what fits for you. unless you have a regulation, then you map it, which I'll talk about. But you can pick in there what you want to do, and you can pick how you want to implement it. So it's not a strict, here's the 10 things you have to do about your backups. It's here's some things to think about for your backups. Set your bar, and then go meet your bar. And then you could also see from the breakdown here that govern actually has the highest percentage of the subcategories at almost 30% of all of them. So that real big emphasis was put on the govern of the how are we doing it, why are we doing it. So here's another image from the Cybersecurity Framework version 2. Blow it up so you can see a little bit easier. So here you see it's really, it looks like an hourglass, but it's more of a Venn diagram. You see the intersection in the middle. So what's happening is in every business, there's a senior executive level, whether it's a sole entrepreneur, whether it's president of a small firm, or it's an executive team. You have some sort of executive level whose job is risk management. We need to manage the risk for our business, and information security is one of them. So they're making decisions based on what is a priority, what is their budget, what's the biggest risk. We need to know all of this. But then on the bottom, you have implementers, your operators. These are IT people, whether it's internal IT person, staff, or it's outsourced IT team. They're putting all these controls in place. They're making sure the systems work. And somewhere in the middle, there's a loss of communication between the implementers and operators reporting the risk to the senior executives in the way they can understand it to make the decisions they need to, and reporting it back to the implementers, operators the way they understand it. So that's where that middle business process level comes in, and that's what the NIST Cybersecurity Framework helps facilitate, is documenting in there so we know why we're doing the things we're doing. So here's the link. If you want to write it down or type it down, or reach out to me after to get the clickable link for the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, and a couple steps or things in here that you should go and download. So if you click on read the document at that link, and then see the mappings and download the implementation examples, and then also download the informative references. Those are 2 editable spreadsheets that'll help you map everything the way you need to and understand what it's asking. I'm going to show a little example of that in a second. And then beyond that, you can go to somewhere, and the example I'm going to use here is HIPAA, and you can go out to HHS site, find the HIPAA mapping tool, and then bring that into your mapping spreadsheet that you got from the cybersecurity framework. So now you know what you have to do in the cybersecurity framework that comes from HIPAA. It helps if you have more than one compliance. It helps if you want to do what HIPAA is asking or what your compliance is asking, and build on top of it. And then from there, you make a mapping, or you update your mapping tool, and you add your own mappings and your own scoring, and you make it your own. So I'm going to show you the one that I made. It's from the examples you can download, but I added some of my mapping and scoring to it. So there's all of the cells of it. I'm going to zoom in on half at a time. So it gives you the function, the category, and the subcategory. That's all from the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. And you can't see the function name here, but from the blue color code, you could tell this is the identify function. The category name is also down on the spreadsheet a little, but this is the asset management subcategory. So you can see, or category, and you can see the subcategories IDAM1, IDAM2, talking about inventories of hardware, inventories of software. And then there's the implementation examples. Those columns are all given to you right at that link that I provided, where you can go download the sheet. So it says, example, maintain inventories for all types of hardware, including IT, IoT, OT, and mobile devices. And then from the next one, it says maintain inventories for all types of software and services, including, and it goes on, and there's some examples of how you satisfy this subcategory. It gives you direction on what you should be looking for. You also see a mapping to the NIST Cybersecurity Framework version 1.1, which was replaced in February, in case you were using that and want to map into the new version. And then from there, you make it your own a little bit. So here, I went and got the HIPAA mappings and imported them into a column in here. So you can see that the first 2 here about having inventories maps to those 3 or those 2 specific requirements in HIPAA. So I know exactly where I have to go. I can open up the HIPAA rule. I can go right to that and say, what does this say about inventories? Because I'm going to take this flexible framework and make it have a minimum standard of what HIPAA is saying. And above HIPAA, you'll see it says 67. That's the total count of subcategories that HIPAA maps to. So of the 106 subcategories, only 67 of them map into a map to HIPAA in some way and form. So if you're doing just HIPAA, that's your starting point. Then from there, you can create a scoring. I'm not going to get into the details of my scoring, but I'm using a 5-point scoring, and these are just sample numbers. So you're and here the sample company is doing 2 out of 3 for the practice and 0 out of 2 for the process, for a total score of 2 out of 5. And then the one below it is 1 and 0 for a total score of 1. You can create whatever scale makes sense for you. Just document what it is and how you're categorizing the score. And then what that allows you to do is you can track your total score over time. You can see, well, we did this assessment. We're doing, 2 out of 5. And then, we really have some work to do here. We're doing 1 out of 5. Let's start with that one. And then 2 or 3 months from now, you've taken care of it. It's a 5 out of 5. You can see you made progress. Sometimes it's hard to recognize you're doing the right thing without progress. So scoring and updating your scoring is important for that. And then in the comments, you'll see just the sample text that says in scope. That's just a way of knowing, yep, this is one that we have to look at. And that's where you put all of your notes of how you're achieving what that subcategory is requiring of you. And you could also put in there any of the gaps of, well, we need to do these 3 things. And then you can come back and use this. And as you make your progress and you update your scores, you update your comments to reflect it. So we have a 2 out of 5 because, or we have a 5 out of 5 because. So here's a list of things we've been talking about HIPAA. So there's CMMC for the Department of Defense, supply chain. If you're a subcontractor in there, that's important. I hope you're aware of that. There's also SEC, New York State, DFS Part 500. Part 500 just had an update about a year ago and kind of 6 months ago. And around now, there's new requirements that are rolling out. So if you're not aware of that, I would look into it. PCI DSS. If you take credit cards, you have to fill out some sort of assessment for PCI DSS. And if somehow you don't have any, standard regulation, anything, any of the above or anything that's not listed here, but you're doing business in New York, there's New York State Shield Act, and that has the requirements that you have to follow. And they will investigate after there's an incident or a reportable breach and determine if any fines need to be levied if you're doing what you need to be doing. So here's HIPAA. I'm not going to go into too much details on HIPAA. I want to focus more on the information security program today. But the one thing I do want to highlight here is HIPAA specifically, as one of the oldest standing information security regulations, specifically calls out administrative, physical, and technical safeguards. So if you remember back earlier, when I was talking about information security for cybersecurity, cybersecurity is technical. Information security includes the administrative and the physical. So you can see that example live in HIPAA. And HIPAA also has a privacy rule. So it's not just a security standard, it's a privacy standard as well. So now that we've talked about tracking your score and your progress in the spreadsheet and using the cybersecurity framework as a starting point, where do you start? Where do you go first in there? So I recommend starting with the governance functions because that's going to lead the rest of your efforts. So the 5 that I would start with are inventory, which we talked about a little bit in the example before, data classification, risk assessment, policies, and plans, including testing your plans. So I'm going to go over each of those now. So we have inventory. Like I said earlier, it's both software and hardware. So you want to make sure all of your physical assets are accounted for. All of your software that you're using is accounted for. And you want to make sure you include anything that's cloud or hosted or outsourced or third party or however you want to classify it, because that matters too. Just because it's in someone else's environment doesn't mean you shouldn't have it inventoried. From there, you can move into ranking it by criticality. You want to know, hey, I have these 2 pieces of hardware, which one's more important? The server that runs your business is probably more important than a laptop that an employee uses. So let's rank that accordingly. And you could do that through data classification and risk assessment. So data, or the systems that house the data, need to be classified for proper security. And it's important that the employees who are handling the data understand that classification that you're putting on the system so that they can handle the data appropriately. If they don't know, and then they're at the risk, or your business at the risk of them maybe sending or handling the data in an inappropriate way. So they need to know, they need to be trained regularly. Samples of classification could be private or public, private, sensitive, confidential. Obviously, the things that like PII, personally identifiable information, or PHI, personal health information, that's going to be confidential. Any kind of business or trade secrets you have, that kind of stuff will be confidential. And then other things you could rank at a lower level, items that you might be putting on social media that might be public. Maybe it's private until you post it. So you want to go through and detail out what do each of these ranks mean, and then make sure all of your data is labeled that way. And after you do that, you could put impact levels. So something that's classified confidential probably has a high impact level if it's compromised. Something that's private probably has low. So the classification level itself leads into impact levels, but your risk assessment will as well. So one type of risk assessment is a quantitative risk assessment. It's very in-depth. It assigns monetary values to each occurrence of a risk. It's usually costly and time consuming to do. So it's not where I recommend starting. I just wanted to put a little mention of it out here, and I'm going to move on from it and go to qualitative risk assessments. So this uses a subjective process. This is based on the industry knowledge of the business leader, of the different experts in the room, to say, if I give you an example, what's the likelihood that a tornado occurs at your location? Okay, maybe it's not that likely, or maybe we're in a spot that we would be susceptible to it. And what's the impact? Okay, tornado is going to have a pretty high impact probably. So we're not really assigning values, but we're using industry knowledge of the area, a little bit of research maybe, and just saying, let's assign some values. From there, you create a heat map risk values. And then once you do that, you can rank them from highest to lowest. So here's an example of a heat map. Two examples actually of what heat mapping looks like, depending on how you set your scores. The left example gives a 1 through 5 on both axes. The one on the right is a percentage based. So either way, the color coding is similar, and really will be an indicator. So if you have something that's going to be a high impact, but it's medium probability of it happening, you'll end up in that light red. If it's high impact and it's definitely going to happen, you'll end up in the dark red. This will help you when you have 5, 10, 30, however in depth you go, of listing your risks out, a clear picture of, okay, there's 3 things that are dark red at the top. We should address those. Everything else can wait. It's really important to prioritize and know you're not going to do it all right away. You need to take, that top risk, that top thing you need to do, and start with the top 1, 2, 3 things, and start making progress. So another way of looking at risk assessments is using a stick figure. So pretend you're that stick figure and you walk up on this puddle. There's a high probability that if you continue walking down that sidewalk, you're going to walk through that puddle. The impact is that your feet get wet. Pretty low impact, right? Here's another one. Low probability and a low impact. That's just a little puddle on the sidewalk. It's not the whole sidewalk. You probably don't have to break stride. Maybe you just need to sidestep it. There's a chance you step in it, but again, you're just going to splash some water on your feet. This one, however, you're probably going to stop and look. It's not much bigger than the puddle in the previous example, but if you misstep on accident, you got spikes at the bottom. That's a high impact. And then this one, high probability, high impact. If you keep walking, you're just going to get spiked. So you need to stop and think, how do we proceed here? So this is that dark red, high critical. We can't continue this way. We need to do something. And then you'll see the thought bubble on that stick figure thinking, here's a possibility of what we can do. So responses to risk. The first one is avoid it. Is this something that your business needs to do? Do you need to continue down that path? So this could be, do I need to continue using hardware in my environment, or can I avoid that risk by going to the cloud? Do I need to use this software that's not getting security updates anymore, or is there newer software available? You could really avoid what you're doing by changing your business processes, by changing the way you operate, it might be possible. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're like, nope, this is what we use. We're not changing it. It's too costly to do it, or it would take too much training or something. So let's move on to a different type of risk. So the first one's mitigate it. Can you reduce the likelihood or the impact? Maybe both, but one or the other. Can you make that pit less deep, smaller so you can step over it? Or can you make it so that there's not something as threatening at the bottom of it? So if you can make it, one of those will have, less likely or less impactful, then it'll bring that risk down. And then maybe at that point, you could say we can accept this and continue. Another option is to shift the risk to a third party. Cyber insurance policy is a big example. Industry's changing a lot. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. There could be other shift to third party. So that could be, again, do we take our system that has been running, in our server room all this time and move it to the cloud, let someone else host it and shift the risk of that hardware failure to them and let them maintain it. So it doesn't remove the risk entirely, but it could reduce it. It could be a combination of those responses. You might be mitigating it and transferring it, or at the same time there. Then, at some point, you might just say we're accepting it. Whether we've done any of those other responses or not, we know the risk is there. We know the likelihood that'll happen, the impact that'll happen, the impact it'll have if it happens, and we're going to document it. That's the big thing you have to do, is you have to document it. To say we evaluated it, we made a business decision to not take any further action, because sometimes a mitigation might be tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the risk occurring might only be $3,000. Okay, well, if we wait 6 months to pay $3,000, it's better than paying $30,000 today, right? So just document why you're doing it, the evaluations you did, how you came to the conclusion. That way, you can when you reevaluate and redo your risk assessment, you see that risk sitting there. You see, oh, we have this acceptance here. We acknowledged it. Let's see, is this still true, or did it change? Should we do something different? Is it cheaper to mitigate now so we don't have to accept that risk anymore? And really, the only unacceptable response is ignoring it. If you're not doing assessments, or you're doing them and not acting on them, or you're accepting the risk but not documenting it, you're not really accepting it. Those are all ways of ignoring the risk, and then they just sit out there unattended. So don't ignore it. So I mentioned cyber insurance is a way to transfer risk. Policies, they're becoming more complex. So the insurance company is going to send a questionnaire. They're going to have you fill it out and say, are you, yes, I'm doing, or no, I'm not doing, a whole bunch of things. So, I mean, the first question is, do you know if you're doing it? Or do you know the questions they're asking? They might not be clear on what they're asking either. They might be vague on purpose, just hoping that you'll document what you're doing and report it. So it's really important that you can understand what they're asking, that you have appropriate answers that are accurate, and that you can back up what you're saying with proof. They ask if you have a password policy, and you can't provide a password policy. Do you really have one? If they ask if multi-factor is enabled, and you have it enabled on one site but not a couple other sites, and you can't prove that it's enabled, you need a screenshot or export settings or something that when they come back after you file a claim and say, okay, well, you said you're doing these 10 things. We think that should have prevented this from happening. Can you show us proof of your controls? If you can't do it, then you're at risk of that claim being denied. So you might pay years of premiums thinking that you're transferring some of this risk, they're going to make you whole again. And then they come back and say, ooh, well, you weren't really doing what we thought you were doing, so we're not going to give you your full claim or any of your claim. Having an information security program, the way that I'm describing it, is a way to have the right answers and the proof for your cyber insurance. So security policies are required by most regulations, by a lot of third-party contracts. Just mentioned insurance, they're required there. So here's a list of different policies or different components of your policy, depending on how you structure it, that you should have. You should at least consider each of them. They're all important. And it's important that you have stuff like acceptable use, that your employees sign, the whole policy. You might have them sign the whole information security policy. In the acceptable use is either part of that or part of the employee handbook, or it could be standalone. But you should be reviewing and updating policies at least annually, more frequently if there's changes. And anytime there's a change, all employees should be signing that they've reviewed the updates and that they agree to what the updates state. And there's also plans: incident response plan, business continuity plan, disaster recovery plan. We'll talk about those in a minute, a little bit. So just like in HIPAA, there's security rule and a privacy rule. You should also have a privacy policy if you're collecting any kind of data about the people you serve, about consumers, about your clients. And the privacy policy should really explain how you're collecting it, how you're handling it, how you're processing it, and how you're protecting it. So that ties back into security a little bit, but the collect, handle, process part is kind of unique from security. And you'll see that list of key elements in there that you really want to be clear on how you're sharing it, how long you're keeping it, if there's a minimum and a maximum time, what the user's rights are. Can someone reach out and say, hey, delete my data? Do you allow that? That's something that's required by GDPR for Europe. So if you have any clients in Europe, that's required there. And I think that's kind of a foreshadow of what will be coming to either the US or on a state-by-state basis. In California and New York, they're usually leaders in a lot of the security and privacy rules that we see in other countries. So then there's the business continuity plan, disaster recovery plan. And this helps establish cyber resiliency in your business. So this is saying we've identified that something's happening. It maybe something that's obvious. It may be natural disaster, a fire, or some kind of what you'd think a disaster being. Or it could be, oh, we had a drive go on a server. We need to do some sort of restore. It could be a technical thing as well. And how quickly can we roll with the punches and get back up and running, or stay up and running and not have to shut the doors, not have to stop business? Because as every business knows, if you're not available and you have downtime, that's money. So you have to start by creating the plans and creating the plans before the incident or the disaster happens, because they're going to be your guide when you get into that time. So if you're in a spot where you need your business continuity disaster recovery plan, you're going to be in a stressful time. You want documentation to go back and be like, ooh, what do we do next? Who do we contact next? So the important components are: define what disaster is. An incident response plan, define what an event is, define what the incident is, and who's authorized to declare a disaster and who's authorized to declare an incident. It shouldn't be everybody. It should be a named individual or named individuals in leadership in your organization that can say, we are having a disaster, we need to initiate the plan. And include the steps and where they should be taken. So, okay, we declared our disaster. The first thing we need to do is this, and just go through, and each thing should have somebody assigned to it. Everybody should know the rules. And every step should be detailed. You want to make sure you include internal contacts and external contacts. So external examples: legal. You might have in-house legal, but you might rely on an outsourced business attorney that helps you. So evaluate if you need to contact them, and that should be documented in here of what indications that you should contact legal are, and say, hey, we're going through this. How should we proceed? What's your advice? And get them on the phone or get them engaged. Insurance. So if you have an insurance policy, it probably says in there that you need to contact them. It might say in there that they need to be the first person that you contact. They might guide some of your other response, like forensics, where they are going to send somebody and pay for somebody, or will only reimburse you for approved people. So make sure you know that ahead of time, and it's documented. And it helps if you reach out to and have a relationship with somebody in forensics, and you list them in here and they know they're listed, and you don't start scrambling during your incident, your disaster, and say, hey, this is happening, can you help? Oh, by the way, my name is, right? Like, okay, it's going to have a big learning curve there. They should be involved before it happens. And then also be aware of your regulatory reporting. So that list I gave you earlier, anything that wasn't on that list, all of them, in addition to the security rule and the guidance on the controls they have, all have regulatory reporting requirements of once you've determined that data has been lost or has been breached, this is who you have to contact. This is the process to take. So that should be in there as well. So after you create the plan, it's important to review and update them regularly and then test via tabletop exercises regularly. And those two things happen kind of hand in hand at the same time. It should be at least annually. And then I'm going to elaborate on what tabletop exercises are. So this is the method for testing the plan. This is sitting down with everybody that I just talked about that you need to name and saying, here's a scenario. We are going to simulate that X happened. And you're going to spend a time limit, maybe up to 30 minutes, and you're going to talk through the scenario. So every 5 minutes or every interval, you're going to say, okay, this is how the situation's developed. This is what's going on now. How do we react? This is what we found out. How do we react? And you just simulate that you're going through it. You want to include disasters. You want to include hardware failures. You want to include technical things like ransomware or viruses. And you want to go through a couple different scenarios and just say, does this plan help with a range of different scenarios? And as you're going through, you might say, oh, we need to call our insurance company. Oh, we don't have them listed in here. Do we have their phone number? Do we know who we're calling? Or as maybe it's your previous agent or your previous company's information. So you can document any holes in the plan that need to be updated so that you are confident that you have a better step-by-step procedure if something happens. And it's really, the goal is to become better prepared and not place blame on people or embarrass people. Ooh, you didn't know what to do, or you did something wrong. It's just, nope, we're valuing the plan, not each other. One thing I get asked about as well, or it's kind of a topic out, excuse me. There's a topic out there is virtual chief information security officer. This is really an outsourced person that acts like a CISO for an organization that just might not be large enough to pay a salary and benefits and all that to a full-time person. So it's at a fraction of the cost. It's a amount of hours a month or on some sort of basis, usually some sort of retainer. And they're not the same as a managed service provider or managed security service provider. Typically, the MSPs and the MSSPs are implementing technology, making the business go, implementing security solutions. They're more of that operator level that I talked about earlier, but they might have the experience and they may offer the service in addition to what they do. But that's not by default a given that it's the same. So after you've gone through some of those governance exercises, what do you want to do next? So my recommendation is starting with CISA, which is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency of the United States. There are 4 easy ways to protect your business. So this is actually the theme of this month, a Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And these are the 4 topics or the 4 steps that they've had for the past several years to really simplify what you should be doing, what a business should be doing to protect the business, what individuals can be doing to protect themselves. And it's these 4 things. So I'm not going to go into detail, but I'm just going to list them. I've been posting all month, and I'm going to be through the rest of the month on my social media, little blog posts and trivias and quick information about each of these. So I would recommend going to social media, at least get to InfoSecurity Blueprints page and at least seeing what I've been saying there. And if you have questions beyond that, look into it a little further, reach out. But teach employees to avoid phishing, require strong passwords, require multi-factor authentication, and update business software. Those 4 things will reduce the most risk if you start with those 4. Beyond that, I like to recommend the next 3. So backups, endpoint protection, and firewall. So I'm going to go into those briefly. And I do have slides for each of those 4 CISA requirements. So if you reach out for the slides, there's a little bit more information here than what you might be seeing if you go to social media. So if you want to start on LinkedIn or Facebook, see what those posts are about, and then request the slides, there's a little bit of info here as well. So backup solutions, we want to start by saying, what do you back up? And that goes back to the governance function, where we identified our systems or classified our systems and we know what we have. You really do have to do that first. So that's why I recommend doing the governance stuff first, because you don't need to back up every file. You don't have to pay for storage for every file in your system. You definitely want it for your critical systems, which you classified earlier. And then you want to go through some of the more technical considerations of the backup. What type of backup is it? What's the frequency of your backup? How much data are you willing to lose? Can you lose an hour's worth? Can you lose a day's worth? Can you lose none? Are you have to be real time all the time? So you really have to make those decisions and find the right solution. Do you have cold storage or air gapped backups where if a system becomes infected, it doesn't then back up into your solution and then infect your solution? You should have an isolated, offline version of your backup. So if your entire system gets compromised, you can unplug it from the internet, kind of take a step back, you have a backup, restore your backup. If you don't have that, you're at risk of losing your entire backup solution, all of your backup data, and you're back at risk again. And then a lot of times backup solutions will have business continuity and disaster recovery solutions built in. So this doesn't replace the policy, or the plan that we talked about earlier. That's really going to drive what this should be. But some of those solutions will allow you to spin up virtual images if you do image level backup of the system in the cloud, so that if you lose an entire network closet to a fire, or sprinklers go off, or floods out, or whatever the natural disaster could be, you can spin up a cloud version and everybody connects to it and business goes on as usual. Well, you rebuild your physical infrastructure, restore to it, and then switch back to it. So does your backup solution have that built in? Endpoint protection. So everybody knows this is antivirus. That's really still it's an appropriate term, but kind of an outdated term for the enterprise level or for a business. They've evolved into a couple of different packages. So EDR is endpoint detection and response. That will monitor in real time and sometimes respond in real time to help isolate threats. So antivirus is really just a dictionary. Hey, here's all the signatures we know that are out there. If you see this, shut it down. EDR is actually looking and saying, oh, that doesn't look right. Let's look more, and it'll react to it a little bit better. And the MDR will use EDR technology and other technology, but it'll go across the entire environment, not just your endpoints. And the extended detection response, XDR, that'll integrate data across all of your endpoints, networks, email, cloud, etc., so that it can start correlating. Hey, we saw this thing happen on 3 email accounts, and it's now, we now see it also at the border at our firewall. There's correlating that there's some action happening here that we don't like, and we're going to respond to it and shut that down. And then next generation firewalls. So if you have a physical environment, you're not all cloud-based, you're not all remote work, that's important to have at your business. There's a bunch of key components that are in there that help protect you. So I'm not going to go through all those, but I recommend looking into all of the different features of the firewall and determine, what is appropriate for your business, what should you enable, how should be configured. So with that, I'm going to wrap up and we'll move into questions in just a second. I do have upcoming presentations. Tomorrow I'll be doing a webinar similar to this for the Jamestown Small Business Development Center. Wednesday I'll be doing one for the Cheektowaga Chamber of Commerce. Next Wednesday I'll be in person for a similar presentation in Olean at JCC for their Hatch Entrepreneur Program. And then I also did similar ones for the Exchange of Beverly Gray in Buffalo, the Kenmore Rotary, and the Southtown Regional Chamber. So act today. Start building your program today. You can start by requesting these slides from me. There's all sorts of clickable links in it, all sorts of resources that'll give you guidance. And then from there, reach out to me and set up a meeting. I would be very happy to sit down, learn about your business, learn what you're doing, and expand on what I talked about here and provide a little more guidance and say, okay, well, you have this regulation, you should do this. This is what I would recommend doing. And that entire introduction and exploratory of figuring out what your business is doing, that's all free. I just want to set you in the right direction. And if you're comfortable doing it on your own, you go off and you can do it and bounce some questions off of me. If you're not comfortable on your own and we come up with some sort of engagement, then I'm also happy to help. But I'm not a salesperson. I want to be educational. I want to work with you. I want to set you in the right direction and enable you to do it on your own if you'd like to. So get that in the cybersecurity framework that I talked about earlier, go through your governance tasks, and then go through those 4 easy ways to protect your business, additional considerations, and build from there. So I'll leave it on this slide. If you didn't get my contact info earlier, that QR code or that link to my doc card will give you my entire contact information. My email's on the screen. And at that point, we'll open up to questions.